There we go. I see
All
it.
right, we're rocking and
So,
rolling.
so again, we welcome everybody to our stakeholders meeting today with Lutheran Settlement House, where we are presenting creative interventions to respond to violence. During our current climate and even after, this is a wonderful way to find tools and training to help deal with our most vulnerable populations, those that are afflicted with mental health issues, our seniors, those that are dealing with domestic violence, or just different types of community relations aspects. And we're so lucky to have a wonderful community partner and the people in it at Lutheran. So again, I'm going to welcome today's panelists. We have Richie Schulz, our lead trainer and community education director at Lutheran. Good morning, Richie.
Good morning.
And we also have Vashti Bledsoe, bilingual domestic violence program director at Lutheran Settlement House.
Morning.
Good morning, Vashti.
Morning.
Erica, should we introduce you because you're a superstar?
No.
So I'm going to turn this over really to the people that know, to Richie and Vashti, and we look forward to our time today. We ask everybody, we're going to keep you all on mute if we can. If you have questions, we'll reserve time at the end, and certainly you can post them in the comments portion. So take it away, guys.
Awesome. Morning, everyone. Thank you for that lovely introduction, Mark. So as Mark was just saying, my name's Richie, and I'm the community educator and lead trainer at Lutheran Settlement House in our domestic violence agency. And I'm going to be leading us through the next 55 minutes or so. And to start things off, I'm going to share my screen. So just give me a second. So can folks see my screen now?
We can.
All right, so I'm going to move us through some slides to help facilitate this conversation today. And so for folks that are a little bit less familiar with Zoom, you'll see that there's a toolbar at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to unmute yourself or start your video if you'd like to jump in or have a question. Also, I'm going to be inviting folks to respond to some prompts and stuff through the chat. So feel free to click on the chat to type in any questions or to respond to stuff. Also, if you're having any logistical needs or difficulties, feel free to reach directly to me or Vashti, and we'll try to get those taken care of to support you to be able to show up today. Also, feel free to, under the participants button, to rename yourself, add your pronouns if you'd like. And I want to invite folks to be present in whatever way it works for them today. So that might mean removing distractions, getting a beverage, or having some note-taking stuff. But yeah, I want to invite you to show up in whatever way works for you as we move through the presentation today. And so, what we're going to be unpacking or getting into a little bit is different creative interventions to respond to violence, to respond to harm, to be in community in ways that are not necessarily relying on the police. And I wanted to just ground us as we get started in a quote from a mentor of mine, Miriam Kaba. She says, "No one enters violence the first time by committing it." And I want to offer that quote because I personally believe that somewhere along the line, we maybe got away from that idea. And when we ground ourselves in the fact that, at least for me, I don't know anyone who invented violence, the sorts of interventions that we might have, that we might engage in when we think about harm, when we think about violence, might be very different than the ones that we're relying on primarily right now. So I want to start things off by just getting a little bit into domestic violence as a springboard into just larger how we might navigate harm in our community. And I'm curious, feel free to just shout it out or to type into the chat if that works for you. Like what images or associations come to mind when you think of domestic violence?
You mean like bruising, things of that nature?
Bruising, yep. Mm-hmm.
Physical hitting and punching and...
Mm-hmm. Visible hitting, punching.
Verbal abuse?
Verbal abuse, absolutely.
Power and
Emotional abuse
control.
as well. Power and control. Yeah, absolutely. And so that's the
And
one
manipulation.
and manipulation, absolutely. And so the I want to just offer for today as we move through stuff that domestic violence is a pattern of behavior, just to take everything that's been shared and wrap it all together, that's beyond physical. So yeah, we are talking about the bruising and the physical violence, but also the emotional, the verbal, the financial. It's a pattern of behavior that's beyond physical, used to establish power and control over a partner. And this power and control piece is the piece that I really want to drive home if you take away anything about domestic violence, is that domestic violence is about power and control. It's about agency. It's about whether or not someone is able to make decisions for themselves, or whether or not their primary purpose, interest, ways in which they're showing up in the world are to serve the needs of their partner. So before I go any further, any questions or clarifications, pushback on this piece? Cool. I'm going to keep it moving then. So I want you all now to just take a moment to just check in with yourself and think through what's a time that someone supported you? What specifically did they do? So this could be in terms of maybe a job transition, making a hard decision, maybe you were in a rough place in your life. What was the time that you got support, and what was that person who was supporting you doing? And feel free to type that into the chat, or if you want to hop off mute and share to the larger group, you're welcome to do that as well.
They listened.
They listened. I see validated
feelings.
What else?
They were present.
Supported my decision.
Supported your decision.
Just thinking about the listening and the like, not talking over you or telling you about them, like, and what, but letting you tell your whole story, you know, and then just being there.
Not judging.
Absolutely. What else? Showed up physically. Here, I want to track some of these. Physically accepting your perspective as truth.
Yeah, I mean, even like the physical gestures of support, like even if they bring you some food or they bring you, you know, flowers or a gift, something like to show.
Or a hug.
Right.
Like to hug a baby.
There we go. So any noticings about this list that we've made so far?
They're all good things.
Definitely all good things. Yep.
That was going out on a limb, Randy.
I was trying to connect them.
They were affirmative actions by another.
Absolutely. The other thing that I'm noticing about, thanks for that, y'all. The other thing that I'm noticing about this list is that They are all ways in which to support someone that aren't about reinforcing power and control over them. They're a way to support someone that is from a basis of empowerment. And I would even go as far to say that we could retitle this list empowerment counseling or support or survivor support. So in terms of what we do at Lutheran, in terms of what it looks like to support survivors in our lives and our communities, this is the overwhelming majority of what it means to be an advocate. If domestic violence domestic violence is about someone having power and control over you and shrinking your agency, the way that we believe that people get out of those sorts of situations, that they are able to have more power and control in their lives, is to be able to make decisions for themselves and to have support along the way in doing that. And all of these different pieces are a part of supporting survivors and people that are experiencing harm to build those muscles back up and to build that sense of agency back up in their lives. So I want to just pause there, come back to the larger group now and ask folks, so here we go. What would it look like to do this in your community? What would it look like to bring this back to your business or in your corridor?
I guess creating a place where people who are dealing with these things can go to have that type of support set up, like almost a support system set up for them.
Mm-hmm.
People, availability of people.
Mm-hmm. What else?
Richie, you can see everybody's very shy.
That's okay.
It seems like there's like the support group feature and then like the services, like the physical helping with food and other things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the emotional support as well as another piece of it. Is that Jamie? Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yes.
The other piece of that I'm hearing is like, but then there are actually the material resources that we can offer as well.
Resources, yeah.
I feel like to build off of what Jamie was saying, some of the less tangible resources also kind of speak to a sense of belonging in a community
Mm-hmm.
context.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. What does it look like to create more belonging in your community?
Inclusivity, creating a place where people feel involved and appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
And respected.
Could I ask a follow-up there, Mark?
Sure.
How would you know if you were doing that in your community?
Well, I mean, I think primarily it's always, at least I hope, is the feedback that you get, meaning that if you are opening up this avenue of support, inclusivity means that you're dealing with, I think, a corridor where you have people of all types in a place of comfort where they feel comfortable to express themselves both professionally, emotionally, verbally, and they know that they feel not just respected, but their opinions are validated, that there is a place where they can communicate, which is what we're all trying to do, to voice their concerns, whether it's through committees, direct communication, and then you hope in action by things that they want to put together and the type of initiatives that we run to show that there is a place that we're all working together. I know that's sort of all over the place, but just speaking off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. I really appreciate that. And here, so I'm actually going to take us off the
And saying things like you just said, like telling someone that you appreciate them.
Yeah, so I want to thanks for sharing that. And so I want to just slow things down here for a second because I'm curious to just get a little bit more into now, like what's hard about that, or what gets in the way of doing that specifically in Fishtown?
I think that there's, oh, go ahead, Venice.
Not that it's, I'm going to say Fishtown at this, what I'm about to say. I'm sorry to be late. Venice Whitaker from Council President Darrell Clark's office. So last year, our HR director, who had been working for city council for over 20 years, was murdered by her husband in front of her twins. And she had been living with domestic violence for years with him. No one knew about it. No one asked her why, she had bruises. She never spoke about it. She was always there to listen to everyone else. If someone could have intervened, maybe she'd still be living or maybe not. But sometimes, situations like this happen closer to home without people really knowing. So it's just kind of being aware also, just overall, of who's around you and who you're even working with. Domestic violence, a lot of violence of those that are at home usually happens more times than not.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that, Venice. And yeah, I think that there's a lot in there specifically around the ways in which, so like two things there. One, just the amount of abuse that is like so pervasive in our society, how much it would go down if people were less isolated. And then the other piece that I just want to offer there is, so going back to that list of being non-judgmental, of being supportive, of being open to people and the decisions that they're making, when we aren't showing up in that sort of way, that is actually one of the most powerful ways in which survivors and other people that are experiencing harm become isolated. It's one of the most powerful forms of abuse, because when people are in the messiness of survival, if we're stigmatizing those sorts of strategies, if we're not supporting people that are making decisions that maybe we don't agree with, then the abuser can say, "You're no better than me." They can say, "I saw you do this other horrible thing, and I'm going to tell other folks about it." The person might feel like, "Oh, I can't actually go to my friends for support because they're going to judge me in just the same way." And so that can just create further and further isolation there.
Richie, it's funny you say that. Back in my prior life, I was actually a family law attorney for almost 18 years. So we did a lot of, unfortunately, protection from abuse work and all in Philadelphia and the surrounding counties. And what you often found was, from kind of what you said, it took a lot for someone to even just get to the point to file, whether it's shame, whether it's, there's a love for that other person that, that they want to forgive. And then I think there was also, in many cases, a feeling that the system, maybe as it is set up, couldn't help them. Because ultimately they were walking out with a piece of paper. So I think it was what I saw, it took a lot of things to support them just to get them to that point, and how to set things up for them so that they could feel empowered to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And part of what I want to offer here is that when these systems aren't working for us, one of the ways in which we can still be able to show up powerfully and create more safety in our lives is through relationship and community together. And it really is and really can be that simple. And so just to I really want to stay here for a second around what does it look like to have more what might it look like to have more relationship in our communities to the most vulnerable or the people that are maybe experiencing harm that we're seeing, whether or not they're on the street, they're unhoused, they're using opiates, all of the other sorts of things. What does being in deeper relationship maybe look like?
So
I think
a lot of, go Jamie. Besides where I work now, my background is in therapy. So I worked in social services for most of my life. But what I hear now from a lot of the constituents that live in Fishtown, they feel unheard. They feel that no one is looking out for them, be it that, you know, the neighborhood association or the churches or whoever, they really feel alone. And that's everyone from every kind of background or anything. It seems like people are looking for a group or looking for each other, but there's not a cohesiveness happening, if you understand what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
The most cohesiveness I see is around beer festivals or like street fairs. So
Yeah, I totally hear that. Thanks for sharing that, Venice. I'm curious for other folks as well, how that lands or where you're seeing cohesion or relationship in Fishtown and Kensington.
I think that there is a very small microcosm of the community that is ultra connected in a way, and we see those same folks in all the different rooms and groups. And a lot of the a lot of the space that's left for connection ends up being much more informal due to a lot of people, you know, taking up space in the formal areas.
Mm-hmm. Could you say more about what you mean by taking up space in the formal areas, Kay?
I think that oftentimes we have the same leadership in civic arenas or in RCOs or even at bids and places like this for long periods of time. And that leadership doesn't often build in systems to regularly hear from the constituents that put them in that place. So oftentimes you hear a lot of the same voices over and over. And there might be other voices that are feeling lost or unheard because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that, Kay. And I just want to offer there that, and we're going to get into this a little bit more in just a bit, but one of the things that I've been seeing in the work that I do is the ways in which even some of the organizations that are in the politics of doing good, that are trying to help sex workers, that are trying to help folks that are using drugs, that are trying to help unhoused folks, are not actually in relationship to those communities in a way that is supporting and empowering them that to actually meet their needs. So one of the things that I want to offer that we can do in order to actually like be in our power and take another step towards making violence unimaginable in our communities, to stepping into more creative interventions for how we can navigate conflict, how we can navigate harm, is to actually be in relationship, to actually practice that deeper form of listening with the people that are most impacted by it. And so that might look like reaching out to the Drug Users Union. That might look like reaching out to Project Safe, one of the sex worker advocacy organizations, to hear from sex workers around what they actually need. So we actually know so much about what it looks like to create safety in our communities that doesn't rely on the police and prison systems, just by looking at the ways in which sex workers have been keeping themselves safe in a highly criminalized and stigmatized profession. There are tons of different answers and wisdom and brilliance in those communities around what safety looks like outside of relying on the police and prison systems, but we need to get proximate to those voices. We need to be in deeper relationship to those communities if we want to actually be able to transform the conditions that lead to harm, that lead to the conflicts that happen on the street in the first place.
This is Janae here, owner of St. Lazarus Bar right in front Gerard.
Mm-hmm.
We have to deal with a lot of like the opiate users and things like that being right there at the corner of front Gerard. How would you suggest that we could help people if they don't really kind of stick around to even want to be spoken to? You know, we can't call the police or the there was another association that gave out like the what are those, the shots, the Narcan?
Narcan, yep. Mm-hmm.
The Narcan. And you know, we contact those people, but no one ever comes out, and it's just the problem continues to persist. How do we make people who don't really want to be a part of the community to better it?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Janae, thank you for that question. Yeah, so one thing that I would offer there is like, yeah, there is Prevention Point and some other organizations that are working to train folks on how to use Narcan, which is a drug that removes the opiate from the receptor that prevents overdose, and also has workers that can come out in the community. They're obviously like way over capacity. And so the thing I want to offer here is that, you know, there isn't necessarily a perfect answer, but part of what feels true to me is trying to figure out what actually it means to be in deeper relationship to those folks. And that might not be through you, but that might be through one of the other people that, you know, is frequenting that corner that has a better relationship to that person. That might be through just continued non-judgmental offerings of support to just continue to start building that relationship. I want to just offer a story here to get into an example of what that could look like. A couple years back, there was an activist institute where a bunch of Black and brown feminist survivors got together, and they were trying to figure out ways in which they could keep each other safe without calling the police. And there was one woman who was like, listen, this is something that I'm dealing with right now in my apartment complex. I am like, right above me, there's a domestic violence situation going on. I really want to do something about it, but I know that calling the police is just going to make this situation work. And I don't know what else I can do. And it had never occurred to that woman to try to organize her apartment complex. So just to go back to this Google slide, if you ask yourself the question, what can I do? There's not much else you can do besides call the police or do nothing. But if you ask the question of what can we do, then a lot of ideas start to develop. So maybe this person doesn't want to talk to me, but maybe they talk to the other person on the street. Maybe they have a relationship to some of these organizations or have some trust built elsewhere that we can be in deeper relationship to. Maybe they're connected to the harm reduction community or the drug users union, or at the very least, we can talk to folks in the drug users union to see, hey, what does it actually mean for us to support this person? Do you know anyone who's a little bit more proximate to them? How can we get those person in deeper community and connected to more resources in a way that is empowering to them? And there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all answer to that. So before I say any more, I'm just curious how this is landing, where folks are at there.
Now, Richie, I think these are great things to think about, because I know for me, my staff, all the people on the call, were part of a business corridor. And I think the tendency for some in the past, if they saw whether, like Janae said, people that were using opiates or drug use out in the open, or if you saw somebody, maybe a homeless person who was wandering around under the influence, the initial reaction is to simply want to maybe call the police just to get them out of there. There's not a component of, well, the person will be back. How do we put them in a better situation? How do we as a community do something that's actually beneficial, not just in helping to remove a situation that may be dangerous or detrimental, but help the person as well. So I think has to be a change in almost thinking of simply, I just want to chase this person.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and I also want to, or actually, let me just leave the space still. Any other reactions, questions,
Yeah.
things on top here? Yeah.
I'm Jamie. I'm the FNA Fishtown Neighborhood Association Safety Committee Chair, and I'm like somewhat new to the role, like 1 to 2 years now, though. And I feel like just from being a part of the FNA, I feel like the events we have are more geared towards things that are fun and easy, you know, for neighbors. And what you said about the beer, the festivals, and a lot of our events are great. I mean, and we did, when pre-COVID, bring neighbors together. Even for the safety committee, I think some of the things focus around some events that are just, as I said, like easier to have, and the things that tackle the larger issues or those deeper issues, they are harder. There's more liability that comes with that. But would love to continue the conversation too into ways that we can create those spaces for this, because it is definitely just harder to get to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And would you be willing to say a little bit more about what you mean around liability?
Well, for insurance purposes, and like the safety committee has been hesitant to, for example, town watch was brought up in terms of like the street safety and pedestrian safety. We've steered away from that. I don't want anyone else on the committee, of the volunteers on the committee, to get hurt in the process or to bring liability upon the FNA. Someone after the June 1st events or the events of some of the riots and the protests recently suggested people felt unsafe walking around the neighborhood. Could an escort system be potentially put in place? And they reached out to FNA for that. I put it up to the board, but also, received a lot of pushback. Those types of things are just harder because liability, and you don't want to put any volunteers at risk either. And then, so anything that's a little bit more, I don't want to say substantial, but hard, brings on more liability or is a little bit harder and more of a legal concern, or like could put anyone at risk, it seems a little harder to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for bringing in that reality, because that's absolutely true. And as we get more proximate to violence, sometimes there are risks that come up there. So I totally hear that. Curious about what's on top for other folks.
Rich, I just want to add in like an example of one of the things that we were able to do when we were starting our work with the healthcare community, when we were first discussing to put domestic violence advocates at hospitals and healthcare centers. One of the things that we heard over and over again from the doctors and nurses was, you want us to start asking people if they're being hurt at home, and then what? Like, you want us to create, you're telling us that we need to be asking these questions, but we're scared to death that if someone says no, that we won't know what to say or what to do. And one of the things that we talked a lot about was, educating the healthcare community around how to respond to domestic violence, and also being very clear that, like, we don't expect you to be social workers. We don't expect you to take on a job as a counselor or a savior for people. You know, a lot of times people in these situations already know what they want to do or need to do to keep themselves safe. They just need to know that there are people willing to partner to help them do that. So one of the things that we were able to do that was very successful is just to put welcoming messages out in common areas where patients were sitting, waiting rooms, cafeterias, bathrooms, that said, if you're being hurt or harmed, here's a number you can call, or this is a safe place, you know, you can talk to someone. You know, here's a place where you can, you know, reach out for help if you need to. And then we ask people to not try to be a counselor, like that's our expertise, just to connect that person to the service so that then they can get the help that they need. And that's one of the things that, you know, in your community that you can do. You can put out signage, you can put out messages that says this is a safe place, and then just simply connect people back to Lutheran Settlement House or any other agency that would be able to provide those next steps for people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for adding that, Vash. And I just want to, on that tip, offer here just some of those organizations, as well as some other frameworks to connect people to the things that we don't necessarily have the capacity for ourselves, or where there are legal and liability concerns. So Prevention Point is a harm reduction organization here in Philly. I'll be sending out more information about them, as well as all of these slides and a couple more resources after this is over. But yeah, they provide syringe exchanges, free medical care. For the things that we can't offer, we can at the very least offer to connect folks that could use services to Prevention Point. Another organization is Project Home. Project Home does a lot of stuff in terms of working with unhoused folks and trying to end that cycle of poverty. So they have outreach workers, as well as education, connecting folks to employment opportunities, tons of different resources for unhoused folks in the city. And then I wanted to offer both Philly Stands Up and the Community Engagement Continuum as two different resources around experiments in what navigating harm, what dealing with you know, conflicts or crises on the streets, supporting survivors or holding abusers accountable without relying on the police can look like. And I'll be sending out more information about both of those groups as well. There's also Lutheran Settlement House with all of the services that we have, from supporting survivors to training and education. And I'll be sending out more information about Lutheran as well. Any questions there?
So I think one of the biggest things is also like how community outreach is done. And I know with us being in the pandemic, we are really doing more work on social media, but that was the case in the past too. We have gone away from actually face-to-face interaction, or, you know, flyers or we have our local newspaper isn't really active here anymore, Spirit. So, you know, there's that, like, communication for people that aren't on social media, which that's a wide range age group, because people just don't want the drama of it. But, you know, it's just, that's important. So there used to be a pastor used to do the fishnet, and it was just, he would print out just the news, what's going on, and that's it. It wasn't interaction, and he did it for free, and he would drop it off at all the local stores. He got a new job, so he's not doing this as much, but a lot of people really liked that newsletter. I'll put it in the chat with that. But just like, how do we get to people that aren't on social media, that, as Kay mentioned, that aren't the same stakeholders at every event, like the circle of people that all interact? Like, how do we get to those individuals? And also our youth, you know, we're starting to get a lot, there's a building age group of 17, 18-year-olds around here. And how do we make sure to assist them with their needs also, because they are future adults, you know, and they may stay in the neighborhood. A lot of, you know, we do have a lot of people around that age that are victims of domestic violence that they don't talk about because, you just don't. So, I mean, that's also another focus is that age group.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask a follow-up question there?
Denise.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I just to Denise to the fishnet. I do know that the FNA is trying to get a print newsletter going.
Okay.
So if anyone wants to help with that, or any volunteers, we're trying to reboot our communications committee and do a print component. But we've had a couple turnover a couple times at that position. John Geeting right now is the one who's trying to help with that. But yeah, we understand that need too. We need to get a print newsletter going.
Mm.
Jamie will help, the bid will help you with that as well.
Oh, okay, that would be great. Yeah, John, I'll loop you in.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Just to circle back to the comment about the youth, I'm curious about like what are the needs of the youth in your community?
Jobs, a lot of them are jobs, a place for them to go. It's either, the rec centers, they don't do many activities for them. I know they're trying to, but they don't. Right now, of course, our basketball hoops are removed, so they don't have that. So they're going to stumble into, let's go drink in the parking lots. It's going to happen. Let's go drink in this space because there's not other things for them to do. I mean, but their needs is like a safe gathering space, but that they can still enjoy and not feel like their parents are watching them or telling them what to do, or events that maybe are circled around them that are safe and kind of can build on their resilience, especially if at this point, if they're 17 and they haven't been arrested already, or they, or they're struggling with being arrested, which we have a lot of the youth over at Front Street, some of the youth in the Fishtown and Old Richmond area have been addicted to opiates and are still struggling with that. There's a neighborhood guy that teaches them how to bricklay to kind of give them skill sets. So a lot of them do need skills. And they are looking at the trades for those skills. So I have a lot of them that reach out to me, but the majority is jobs and a space that they can enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what I want to offer there as well, or just another framework in terms of thinking about that is this idea around how we actually reduce violence in our communities. One of my mentors, Tony Lapp, he's the co-director at Menergy, which is domestic. It's a organization that works with people who choose harm or abusers. And I remember I was sitting down with Tony one day and I was like, Tony, you've been in this work for 25 years. How are we actually going to make violence unimaginable in our communities? And what Tony said back to me is he says, if you look at folks like James Gilligan, who's a epidemiologist of violence and has studied violence in societies across the world, what a lot of the research has been showing is that the more income inequality there is in a society, the more violence there is. And so the Gini coefficient, it's an economic concept to measure that inequality. And they found that as the Gini coefficient goes up, as there's less income inequality, the violence goes down. So if we want to end violence, if we want to end domestic violence, if we want to end gun violence, we actually need to reduce the amount of inequality that there is in a society. Because if there's inequality or power and control structured in our institutions and our organizations and things like that, then people get socialized into that in their intimate relationships as well. So if you think about the neighborhoods that we traditionally call the good neighborhoods, some of the more white suburban neighborhoods, they're not good because or have less crime because there are more cops there. They are good or have less crime because they have access to resources. And so I wanted to offer that because as much as like there are little things that we can do every day in order to support the person who is unhoused on the street to get some care or resources that they need, what's actually going to make our community strong and vibrant and resilient is resources for the most impacted folks. For the folks that are unhoused, we need housing for them. We need sustained, affordable, long-term housing, not just homeless shelters. For domestic violence survivors, we don't just need more hotlines or DV shelters. We need affordable housing that they can get into for like sustained periods of time where they're getting the life-affirming support that they need. And the way that we're going to do that is by fighting for more resources and more life-affirming institutions that are supporting the most impacted folks. And so I want to offer that because as folks that are trying to figure out how we leverage our power, what role we as business owners, as community members can play in terms of navigating harm, conflict, supporting survivors, unhoused folks, one of the things that we can do is really start to leverage our relationships with the people that have power to fight for more resources for the folks in our communities that are most impacted by violence, by drug use, by all of those sorts of things. Any questions there? Or reactions? And I'm gonna take us off my screen. Pull everyone back up.
So I feel like we just threw some really big ideas out there. And I think today was a really good introduction to bringing all of our constituents together and thinking about these really big ideas. And I'm thrilled about the potential for what we can all do together. And I know I wanted to just go back to when Richie, you were talking about some resources like Prevention Point and Project Home. We have we hang them in bathroom stalls usually. So if you're in a bar and you're experiencing abuse and you're in there, you can see resources for domestic violence. And I was thinking, Vashti and I were talking before this about creating something that Fishtown businesses can hang either for staff. So if this is happening, then you call this number. If this is happening, then you call that number, sort of resource for business owners. And also hanging up the domestic violence resources in your restrooms. If you are interested in doing that Mark and Kay, we can maybe work together on something that has more of those resources available for business owners to have. Because I know in our meeting on last week or 3 months ago, time makes no sense, that people were like, how do we, if I'm seeing this, who do I call? If I'm seeing this, who do I call? So maybe creating something that we can, you guys can print and share among the business owners. And then also we have a lot of domestic violence resources that are already created for that we can distribute to hang in your businesses.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be great. That'd be great. And I know in planning this together, and again, thank you guys for doing it. We know that this was going to be much longer, so we would love to keep this type of engagement going, because I think you're right, we're hitting a lot of big concepts, and this is a way that we can really narrow it down into action. So for everybody on the call and those we're going to send it out to, we plan on scheduling more in the coming weeks.
Mm-hmm. And I in the follow-up, I have some other little cheat sheets of those actual little pieces of here's the person to call for this thing that I can send out as well. Yeah.
Great.
And if there's anything in particular, because I think as business owners and people who work for our community organizations, you might be thinking about different needs that maybe are front of mind for us you might have like a unique set of needs. So if there are things in particular that we can cover for you or have prepared for future discussion, let us know, because we can create something tailored just for what you need to know or are interested in learning about.
Thanks, Erica. And for those that are on this call, the BID actually started a public safety committee where we've had a lot of engaged stakeholders who really want to go about trying to make, taking the opportunities that are presented before us now and finding different ways to improve physical, social safety and working with partners like Lutheran to make these changes. We certainly encourage all of you, if you're interested, let me know at Mark, M-A-R-C, at fishtownbid.org, or K Anderson at K-A-E at fishtownbid.org. We'll add you because we're certainly going to keep meeting and keep doing things we put out already with certainly the help of, I know Erica, you were at the meeting and were very helpful. And we put out, or we're about to release a public safety study or a questionnaire, a survey to get people's ideas of, it's pretty comprehensive. I know Kay sent it out to a lot of the neighborhood groups for their impact, because we really want to try to take the temperature of what's going on in, not just on the corridor, but in our community, so that we can actually start making some positive changes. So stay tuned for that as well.
I think one of the things that I would be curious to go a little bit more in depth on in a future training would be maybe some de-escalation tactics for our business owners to use when they're in a situation where they feel unsafe, how they can, react and try to de-escalate the situation around them. I think that would be really useful, especially for some of our bartenders or bouncers or people who are in the nightlife scene.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a great idea. And I would also suggest that some bystander intervention training to go along with that might be great.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And in the meantime,
that would be great for FNA too. Like our safety committee, I could see people wanting to participate.
Yeah, we can definitely meet that need. And in the meantime, I can also, I just made a note, send out some just like tips and tricks around bystander intervention and de-escalation that we have internally at Lutheran.
Great.
So just to jump in on a few things, and Erica will be familiar with this from Lutheran. I think it was almost like a year and a half ago, Mary Isaacson hosted a meeting for street harassment. It was a time period, well, there's always been a time period, between Frankfurt and Front. There was a lot of sexual street harassment happening to individual women that were getting off the L or even just walking along the avenue. So she had hosted a meeting to talk about that. There were a lot of people that were really interested to kind of form more around that and had asked for the bars to have the war training. I believe Janae at the Saint, they have trained all the bartenders about that. So, and then ramp training already includes de-escalation. So every bar is required to get a ramp training. So within that training, there is a talk, what do you do if you see this and you see this? How do you react to that? So there is already that requirement on those kind of levels. And I believe war also does bystander training. What would also, which I've been suggesting this for a while, is some kind of public billboard. I'm not sure if there's a funding aspect or GoFundMe. I've noticed during the pandemic, a lot of people really like to congregate around Lutheran Settlement because of all the seatings and everything. Maybe like a public billboard that says, this is who you could call if you need this, or post these community events here. Something that, people could see as they're walking down the avenue.
It's actually something we've been talking about here, is how to utilize the outside of our building to kind of promote community events and also share more about what happens at Lutheran Settlement House. Since I know a lot of people have lived here for years and years and still aren't quite sure what we do, since our name doesn't really tell you what we do. So that's a great idea and something we're definitely thinking about, but this is some encouragement to make some moves on that.
I know we're getting close to the witching hour, so I don't want to limit anybody else's questions. And I want to thank Richie, Vashti, and Erica for their time today. The information and the dialogue was great. I think we all loved that it was actually interactive with us to really get us thinking. And I think that's really how we'll be able to make those types of changes that we need. And like I said, I'll be in touch with Lutheran about setting up more of these, and we can kind of pare it down. But are there any other questions before we let these fine professionals go? Hearing none. Thank you. Is there anything you want to conclude with, Richie, Vashti, or Erica?
Just wanted to say thank you guys so much for being willing to have these conversations and to, bring yourself more into the community and, to see better change for people. I know that all of the survivors that we serve would want me to thank you on their behalf for reaching out and having this conversation and trying to create more safe spaces. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I think that we can do a lot of great things in the community together, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, just want to echo all of that. Really appreciate y'all having us today and looking forward to building and making our communities more powerful and resilient together. So thanks, everyone.
With that, we want to thank you all again, and I want to kind of follow Richie's lead and say I appreciate each and every one of you and all of your time and your efforts and your thoughts and your opinions. It means a lot because it shows how much you care. And again, to everybody at Lutheran, we really are lucky to have you in our community. And we look forward to really sharing and what you do and utilizing what you do, because really the community really benefits from it. So thank you all again.
Thanks, y'all.
Have a great day, everybody. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You also.